Hello and welcome to my second episode on building a computer, and today we're going to be covering choosing your CPU. And CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. You can find it on Newegg by going to Shop All Stores, Computer Hardware, and then CPU processors. And you're going to want to go to Desktop because I'm assuming you're building a desktop. And your first choice that you're going to have to make is AMD versus Intel. And now, at the moment, AMD definitely has that better prices. So if you're building a budget computer, I would definitely go AMD. But that's not always true. You could also go Intel. They do have some lower priced processors. But right now, generally AMD is the lower price. But personally, at the moment, I like Intel. And I like them for the main reason that their manufacturing technology is ahead of AMD's. AMD has a 32 nanometer processor. That means that's the size of the individual transistors in the chip, and the transistors are what makes up the CPU. It's just a little component. You don't really need to understand it, but you just need to know, like, the smaller they are, the better. And right now, Intel, if you go search for that manufacturing technology, all that comes up is Intel. So that means they have the most high-tech CPUs out there. And now if you go to lowest prices, you're going to be spending at least $200 on a processor. Now they are quad cores. They do have a pretty good gigahertz. Their operational frequency. There's nothing wrong with it. 3.5 gigahertz turbo, that is plenty fast. So I would have no hesitation going with this over an AMD 6-core for the same price. I honestly, at the moment, I like this more. It's just going to give you better performance, and that's just all you have to think about. But we're going to go over both AMD and Intel. So right now, if I was going to go Intel, I wouldn't go 32 nanometer. I would only go 22 nanometer. So if you're not willing to spend $200, just go AMD. Just because I like them better. And I would go probably one of these two for a decent gaming computer. I don't think I need a ridiculous clock speed for my CPU. I don't need that. They're all quad cores, so there's no difference there. Some of them, generally, if you're watching this video, you are a first-time computer builder. Generally, you're not going to be overclocking, so you do not need the K edition. You don't need to spend the extra money on it. So I would go with one of these two. This one does have a higher operational frequency, but it does take up a little bit more power. But that's really not that big of a deal. I would personally go with this one because it's the same price. It is a little bit faster. I just like everything about it. So this is the Intel Core i5 3450 Ivy Bridge 3.1 gigahertz processor, and I like this one for Intel. Now going to AMD, manufacturer AMD, and then we're going to search that. We're going to narrow it down. Again, lowest prices. Then I would go to the best manufacturing technology that AMD has, which is currently the 32 nanometer processor. And personally, I wouldn't go with AMD. I would go anywhere. I would go 3 gigahertz or higher. I wouldn't go anything less than that. Everything else doesn't really. I don't really care about the integrated graphics. Socket type, I would go AM3 Plus because that's just the standard. You don't have to worry about the core. And then it just comes down to what you're doing. Generally, I would go with a quad core. It's going to be good for gaming. It's going to be good for word processing. It's going to be good for whatever you're doing. It's also going to be quad core is really becoming the standard for processing, and that's just what comes down to it. You can see that these do take up a little bit more power with the 95 watts and 125 watts, but they are significantly cheaper. $100 for a quad core at a higher operating frequency. Just the manufacturing tech is not as good. And that's really what you're paying for. And honestly, I would pay for that. If I had to choose between this 8-core at 3.6 gigahertz, and the Intel, I would go with the Intel. Just because I don't need 8 cores, but I do like the better manufacturing technology, because that's going to give you better performance, better power usage, better overclocking. If you are going to overclock, I don't recommend it for first-time builders. If you know what you're doing, you know who you are. Generally, you can overclock a little, but I don't recommend it. Personally, at the moment, just looking through these, I would either go with this one, because this has a ridiculously high clock. 4.2 gigahertz is unheard of for stock. That's absolutely ridiculous. Usually that's what you get out of an overclocked processor. And with this, there's no overclocking. I would either go with this one, or if I wanted a 6-core, I would go with this one. They're the same price. It just depends on what you're doing. Generally, more cores is going to be better if you're doing video processing. Anything really CPU intensive. If you're gaming, I would just go for the faster clock speed, honestly. I like this one for gaming, or if you're doing anything. This is really cheap, really competitive, really ridiculous high clock speed. Yeah, the turbo is only 0.1 gigahertz faster, but you don't even need that. It's already at 4.2. That's absolutely ridiculous. I'm kind of, freaking out right now, but that's really cool. Like, even this, like, the clock speeds on these are so high. They do run a little bit hotter because the clock speeds are higher. And we'll talk about cooling later. Generally, these Intel processors and AMD processors do come with cooling in the box, so you don't need to buy anything extra. If you're overclocking, I would recommend water cooling or some very good air cooling, but we'll talk about that later. So you see my choices for Intel and AMD. I hope you like the episode, and come back for the next one.